The beginning of Mob Psycho Season 2 has already presented itself with a world of important good messages for the viewer, and if it weren't already inevitable, being the sequel to such a critically acclaimed Season 1 and original work, then it is now assured people that it will remain cemented in the conscience of the viewers. I'm going to look at the main messages in the first 3 episodes, mainly episodes 1 and 3, and share some of my personal convictions and connections to what I think are universally helpful and great messages that this show presents. Episode 1 ends with a very clear shift in tone after reintroducing much of the cast and showing Shigeo continuing to try and improve himself. It leads to somewhat of a wholesome lull that the viewer falls into. Starts with a bit of action, then comedy, and then seemingly in a positive upswing of romance. This is the first signal for a major theme of these first few episodes, Mob's empathy toward others, where it should and should not be directed. After the first rug is comedically pulled out, it is revealed she has also been faking it to avoid public shame with her toxic friend group. They dared her to fake being his girlfriend due to the embarrassment that was Mob's speech, or lack thereof, and losing a bet of sorts. So Mob's extra efforts to be empathetic have ended up turning on him and leaving him hurt and empty. Where this may lead another character to begin not trusting people as much, or to be less willing to honestly put themselves out there, after the shock fades away and Mob sees Emmy being teased, he does the route of humility, but in a way that conveys the respect he has for himself. Now, this is a bit of a side note, but I think it's important to point out that this is actually a common tactic people teach in more business-like scenarios that can apply just as well to our personal lives. A way to earn respect with someone who may not already respect you is to flatly, without malice, explain yourself and why you are doing what you're doing, and why you will not conform to what they are expecting of you. It conveys that you think your time and your opinions matter, and that you have enough self-respect and value not to be bent by the usual conformity of others. So strangely, you can diffuse the situation and come across better by facing the problem calmly and directly, and having enough self-respect not to bend. Mob does this by essentially saying, I don't care what you have to say. I enjoyed reading this. I liked what Emmy wrote. Even if she won't stand up for it, I will because this matters to me. It is important to me. You don't determine what is weird or lame or whatever for me I do. My life does not live on your terms, although I respect the terms you may live your own on. So in an act of emotion and humility, by picking up the scraps and refusing to relent and explaining why, he actually responds to the bullies in a way that, if the character allows it, leaves them with the most process to think through, and the most positive message that they could maybe experience as well. It leaves them room to improve, without him overly asserting himself on them. He doubles down on his empathy with this response, but makes it clear that he's not allowing people to walk on him. This isn't some passivity anymore. He cares for those around him and he wants the best in others and to have them succeed. This moment was so emotional for myself, and I think many of the people I talked to who watched it, because it reflected an ideal that most people realize, but few manage to pursue as often as they would like. It demonstrates a sort of strength rarely expressed by others, that while effective in drawing people in, may cause uncomfortable situations people aren't confident they can handle. So they become passive or overly aggressive, and Mob was sick of being the former. This groundwork is more heavily adapted in the next 2 episodes, making the beginning of Mob Psycho Season 2 a strong one to say the least. Episode 2 has a couple bits that I think are more importantly expanded upon. It deals with a monster that only has power due to the power that is given to it by the fear of people. It is entirely a figment made by the fears of the public, and so when Mob is disconnected from that fear, it doesn't hold power over him. This also leads to a slight moment where Rengen puts a fake curse on a person to appease a client. This is something Mob wonders about. The curse may not actually have an effect, it could still potentially hurt the way that the client looks at the world. The power of that monster was completely a collective of perspective. Who says curses couldn't manage to manifest somewhat based purely upon the hated intent of others. Mob is being empathetic, but once again showing his respect both for himself and for others. It isn't the sort of giving that puts himself down as a bridge for others, although he may still be stepped on from time to time. The final big adaptation to this groundwork that was laid in Episode 1 is when Episode 3 switches perspective and puts two groups of people opposed to one another absolutely. Finally, Mob has to tug at a new problem that has huge possible ramifications. Who deserves my empathy? Everyone can't equally have it in all cases. How do we determine when people deserve more or less? Are we not sort of valuing or devaluing people based on our own arbitrary standard? What is a more true standard? Is there one? What happens when there isn't a bad monster to eliminate, but a loving family in its place? That's the question I think these first 3 episodes tease up for this season. Who is worthy of my empathy, and what does that empathy look like? For me personally, I found when I was in high school, the drummer in my band could be often aggressive and violent with others, emotionally manipulative. He smoked everything, drank everything, slept with countless people. I was technically, though, his right-hand man, but I didn't act much like any of that. He and I respected each other, and were actually best friends. I saw a place of sympathy for him. I understood the struggles in his heart and in his head, and while I didn't share the same coping mechanisms as him, hopefully mine were a little less self-destructive, his way of doing things was still somewhat understandable, or at least explainable to me. So when people would have problems with him, they would sometimes go to me, and it was weird, because I knew, at least for part of the time, he was probably the one in the wrong. But he's my friend, and I didn't feel like it was right to just turn on my friend after he relied on me so much. I was always afraid that we would end up having some big ugly fallout one day and that would end our relationship proper, but it didn't. He mellowed out, sure, but it was because he was taking more and more extreme measures to cope with his anxieties. Eventually, after a couple of years of college, I haven't talked to him. It just faded out like it was nothing. So I never got some story arc completion, some absolute solution on if I should have acted a different way or if I was right to act how I did. I'm not sure if my empathy was always in the right place, and I'm not sure how I'm supposed to reflect on that. My family over break pointed it out a few times to me that I am a very empathetic person. I imagine in light of how I had been considering others for manners of my parents' recent divorce situation. It's because I know that there is a lot of pain out there with my mom and dad and my sister. I want them to deal with as little as possible in regards to the difficulty behind the situation. I want to remain cool and calm and understanding, stoic and strong-headed, but the question has been in my head. When do my emotions matter? Where am I supposed to come in? Am I, by denying this, not respecting myself and my own feelings? And I think this is why Season 2 has come at such a right point in my life. It is important to respect yourself and to have empathy for others. But respect yourself enough not to exclude yourself from that said empathy. And I think that's what Mob is learning, by standing up for himself and allowing some people to still step on and kick at him. I really hope that you are all doing well. This channel has been about the only thing going well for me lately, and for that I am super grateful. We've gained 4K subs since January, and we still aren't at the end of the month. If you want to support my continued existence, please considering doing what The Single Way Out, Whizbang2093, and so many other wonderful people have, and consider supporting me on Patreon. If you are hearing me say this, I appreciate you for watching to the end. I hope you have a great week, and I'll see you next Friday.